want to take us through a little bit of a history lesson about burnout and how we framed burnout in different um, iterations of psychology, because psychology is an evolving science, just like other areas in medicine. And there's been different understandings of what makes us human, how do we manage stress. The word stress wasn't even really a thing until, recently. So I want to just take you through a brief history of psychology. So in chapter 1 of Monique's book, she takes about 4 or 5 pages and summarizes the history of psychology, like
Seems impossible.
since the 1700s to now,
Yeah.
And specifically Western psychology.
Yeah.
And the first part, when we first started looking and conceptualizing the human experience, is that the human was seen as kind of a machine, right? So they may have had like a soul or something, but mostly the human was a machine, and there were some mechanistic things we could do in the human in order to manage pain or manage illness. And so in that mechanistic view of the human, burnout shouldn't exist because the inner life was actually not acknowledged. There was a time in medicine where we actually didn't even acknowledge the fact that there was an emotional life or an inner life. That's part of our history in Western medicine and Western science. And so burnout then would be a problem that shouldn't exist in that context.
Unless there was something wrong with you.
Well, you just push through and you keep going.
Or,
right?
Or
you die.
Yeah, that piece.
But
it's kind of an inner joke. I'm always the guy who brings up death.
Then with Freud and Jung, there's this movement to exploring the inner life of the human experience. That, it's not just about your body and maybe some religious stuff you do somewhere over there that has nothing to do with your body, but there's this inner life. There's a consciousness. This was a new concept in Western psychology.
So not that old.
That was, like in the 30s.
Yeah.
Right? Like it wasn't that long ago that we were, okay, wait, I have to go back and make sure.
I shouldn't have asked her a question because she's very accurate.
Yes, look.
I just go, well, it's about 100 years ago.
So yeah, about 100-ish years ago, that was the first time we were talking in Western medicine about the inner life of a person beyond just their physical body. That's not that long. And so burnout was then a problem with the inner forces that are working together or not together and creating conflict. That's how burnout would have been framed. Recently, in the 80s, we started getting really curious about neuroscience, right? And the brain and the mechanisms of the brain and how it works. And so for the last 50 years or so, we've been talking about the wiring, right? Synaptic pruning, or the brain, or fight or flight, or these different concepts that are around the wiring in the brain and the chemistry of the brain. And so if you're burnt out, then you got to recalibrate your brain somehow. And that's the issue.
And we know we're talking to you guys and you know most of this stuff. It's just to get us on the same page.
Yeah, just to kind of take us through a little bit of a journey. And then with the trauma-informed movement and with the work of Dr. Gabor Mate and some others, there's this, and more relational elements coming into psychology. There's this recognition that trauma is actually connected to relationship. So it's not just about an individual disconnecting your own wiring. There's a relational and safety component to your psychology, to your inner life. And so then the way we would frame burnout then is say, well, you don't have enough social supports, and that's why you're burnt out. So it's a problem with relationships, or you're not somehow there's unsafety in your environment, and that's why you're burnt out. So all of these are different ways of explaining the concept of burnout based on where psychology has been historically.
So if that's true, then we're still in the evolution process of understanding ourselves as humans, right? Agree with that? Like we were here, that was the truth, and now we're over here, and now we're starting to see some new research coming out.
So we build, right? So each of those movements has built on the last one. So we still say, okay, maybe there's a problem in the physical mechanism of the human body. There also could be a relational issue. So you're absolutely right. It's cumulative, right? Each of these has built on the one before. Absolutely. Agreed. So up until now, psychology has told us we have access to our conscious mind and maybe our subconscious mind, and we're this limited system, this limited human with our own lived life experiences.
And that's it.
And once in a while, we have access to something like intuition or a gut feeling. We're not really sure what that is. We don't really talk about it too much. It's somewhere out there. But this is basically where we live, is our conscious and our subconscious mind. And we actually want to challenge that whole perspective, that whole paradigm, with this paradigm shift. And so the first part of that challenge is this. And it's a concept called sovereign agency. So sovereign agency is pretty simple, but nuanced.
Yeah. Concept simple.
The concept is simple, but if we really were to own this concept, it could change everything. So here it is. You can choose and you can change. So sovereign agency is I have the right to choose, to make choices. I can't always choose what happens to me because life does stuff to me, but I can choose my responses.
That's a really simple thing, but if we digest that, and why is that as soon as if I was to experience this on a regular basis, what I end up doing is having responsibility and having to take responsibility for what's going on inside of me. So that it's not, I mean, we have all of these expressions that are so anchored in our language. You make me mad, for instance, right? Well, you did something and I chose to get mad. Just that.
But it doesn't feel like a choice.
But
right? It's like this automatic thing happened in me that didn't feel like a choice.
Right.
And we're saying, even when that automatic thing happens in us, there's some choice around that.
Right.
There's a way to release that. There's a way to move through that. And it's not that complicated.
Yeah, and I think we need to talk a little bit about the not complicated part. Because the cognitive mind, the thinking mind, if it's really simple, it can feel like it's
too simple,
foolish almost.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean just take a deep breath and I'll feel better? That doesn't.
So we don't do it. So we're just throwing that out there just to marinate in for right now.